Hello, anatomy students. I am not back until Tuesday with you all, but I wanted us to get a head start on our second to the last unit of the year, which is Unit 9, covering the urinary system and pH balance. Just a couple of reminders for you. Tomorrow, or today actually, is the end of quarter 3. So I will ensure that your lab quiz and unit exam scores are updated in PowerSchool before they run reports on Monday. Any other missing work, just make sure that it ends up in the hand-in box. I do plan on coming in on Sunday to do last-minute grading and get those grade books all ready to go before the end of the quarter. You can email me. I probably won't answer it until Sunday or Monday, but I will make sure and get back to you if you have any questions. Okay, so Unit 9 is kind of a dull one compared to some of the other ones that we have done, but the urinary system is really, really important. Its main job is to regulate the composition of your blood and by default blood pressure and blood pH. So remember that in order for every tissue and organ of the body to receive adequate nutrition and oxygen and waste disposal, it has to have adequate blood flow. And so anything that regulates blood composition is going to have a major impact on body-wide homeostasis. So the urinary system is a pretty simple one, only contains the 2 kidneys, 2 ureters, which are the tubes that lead from the kidney to the bladder, the urinary bladder, and then the urethra. So these organs are responsible for maintaining blood volume, blood composition, so things like how much plasma is there versus how much protein and how much salt, and it also helps monitor all the fluid of the body. So nephrology is the study of the kidneys, and you'll see this prefix nephro a lot. That just refers to the nephron, which is the functional unit within the kidney. So nephro is the prefix that refers to the urinary system. Urology is the study of the urinary system, but most urologists focus mostly on the male urogenital system, and usually it is obstetricians and gynecologists kind of collaborate with the female urinary system as well. Although those 2 systems are separate in females, they do have a lot of shared things on the outside of the body. And so the male reproductive system is in with urology, whereas the female reproductive system is going to be covered by gynecology. So here we have a view of the urinary system with our digestive and respiratory kind of removed, so it's not in the way. When we do our cat dissection, which will be at the end of this chapter, you will notice that the kidneys are really embedded essentially in the back muscles. It's way in the back behind the peritoneum, which is the main cavity where most of the organs are found. And so they are separated from most of the other internal organs. The ureters, of course, will come out the medial aspect of each kidney and lead to the urinary bladder. Since this is a female system, this other organ situated just superior to the bladder is actually the uterus, and you can see the fallopian tubes and ovaries. Of course, for Unit 10, we'll talk all about the reproductive system, and this tube even behind that is supposed to be the rectum, or the terminal portion of the large intestine. And so there's a lot happening in that pelvic region, especially with females. Notice also the ample blood supply that is being brought in and out of the kidneys, because the kidney's major function is really to filter and to regulate what is in the blood and what gets excreted. So as I mentioned 2 slides ago, the male urinary system is merged with the reproductive system. And so the male urethra is the exit point for both urine and sperm. And so that is different than if we go back to the female system. We have 3 separate openings, essentially, or 3 separate exits, I guess it would be, for 3 separate systems. With males, they have just 1 that is urinary and reproductive, and then, of course, the rectum and anus for digestive system. So there are significant differences in the anatomy and even the physiology of this system between males and females. This is really the first time that we see substantial differences in anatomy between males and females. So we do have one additional gland that is highlighted in this male system, and that's called the prostate gland. And that is where the merging of the urethra and the seminal vesicle, or the urinary and reproductive systems, really takes place. So functions of the urinary system are really important. Regulation of all aspects of blood homeostasis. So we have here listed pH, so how acidic or how basic your blood is, your blood volume, blood pressure, osmolarity, which is like how salty it is or how many solutes are in it, ion concentration, and glucose concentration. So the kidneys also produce a couple of hormones that are really important. Calcitriol will increase blood calcium, and erythropoietin is going to trigger red blood cell proliferation. So if you think back to Unit 6, we had hormones listed for each of the different types of blood components, and that erythro refers to our red blood cells. So it kind of makes sense that in response to monitoring blood volume, it may trigger more red blood cells to be produced, because that is going to have a direct effect on blood volume and therefore blood pressure. The kidneys also are going to excrete metabolic wastes, drugs, and toxins. And when we say drugs, we mean both like over-the-counter drugs, prescription drugs, and of course illegal drugs as well. So the kidneys are the main organ of the urinary system. They're going to do all of those things that we just mentioned on the previous slide. Essentially, once the urine enters the urethra, it is not going to be changed at all. The ureter and the bladder just help to carry the urine and then hold it. And then, of course, the urethra will carry that urine to the outside of the body. So we also have some external structures of the kidneys that you can see on that previous slide. The hilum is the medial indent. This is where blood vessels, lymphatic vessels, and the nerves will enter. And then the capsule, like we've seen in a lot of other organs, is just the outer covering, the outer connective tissue covering. So talking more about blood supply, we see renal as a commonly used term. And so renal is also associated with the kidneys. The artery is going to bring oxygenated blood to each kidney. They're very large arteries. And then the renal veins will drain the blood after it has been passed through the kidney's filtering process and also dropped off oxygen to keep the kidney tissues alive. The suprarenal arteries are going to be going to the adrenal glands, which sit atop each kidney and do help with some of the homeostatic mechanisms that the kidneys do. And they also facilitate the stress response by releasing cortisol, epinephrine, and norepinephrine. So this is what an actual kidney looks like versus our kind of artist drawings. We have our kidney. The little indentation on the medial side is the hilum, and you can see the arteries and veins that will bring blood into and out of the kidney. Then coming out the inferior portion is going to be that ureter, which is a fairly small little tube that will drain the urine that is produced and bring it to the bladder. So when we do our kidney dissection next week, there is a complex internal structure to the kidneys that's really important for its function. The cortex, we've seen this word before, is going to be the outer functional layer. Think of it like a letter C. It's kind of the outside of the organ. And this is where the filtration and reabsorption takes place. So remember, when something is filtered, it is going to leave the blood and then go someplace else, in this case into the urine. And when it's reabsorbed, it goes from the urine back into the blood. And of course, what is filtered and what is reabsorbed can be different during different, hours even. The kidneys are the main way that we regulate all of the body's fluids. So inside the cortex, we have a couple different regions. The cortical zone is going to be the most superficial zone, and this is what does most of the work. The deeper zone is called the juxtamedullary zone. So juxta is a prefix that means next to. So juxtamedullary is next to the medulla, so it's the deepest part of the cortex. And this will create highly concentrated urine if we are in a period of kind of not having enough fluid in the body, so we're a little bit dehydrated. It will help to reabsorb more fluid to keep our blood pressure high enough to sustain the rest of the body, but still be able to excrete those metabolic wastes. Renal columns and the nephrons, we'll take a look at them on the next slide when we have a picture and it makes a little bit more sense. The nephron is just the functional unit of each kidney. They're basically long tubes that have different areas that are more or less, they're able to move materials into and out of the kidney. So here's our nephron. This is exaggerated for size. In reality, they're going to be probably hundreds of times smaller because there are thousands of nephrons throughout the kidney. Also remember, it is three-dimensional. A lot of our pictures have a difficult time showing the three-dimensional nature of these organs, but these are more like a cone than like a pyramid. So think of all of those nephrons kind of being collected into one area. So we can see this lighter color is the cortex, and it goes all the way around the superficial aspect of the kidney. But we do have regions between each of these renal pyramids where it does extend in. So these are called renal columns. And these darker regions where the nephrons are found are called the renal medulla. One is called a renal pyramid because that's their shape. Okay, so this renal medulla is the deeper region of each kidney. It's going to collect urine and then transport it to the ureter. The renal pyramids, like we just mentioned, are these cone-shaped structures that will secrete the urine and facilitate that reabsorption or filtration process. And then a renal lobe is just one pyramid and half of its adjacent cortex. So let's take a look at the picture because that really does make a lot more sense than these definitions. So we've added our one renal lobe here. So this kidney has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lobes. And we can see this pyramid versus the column in between. Okay, so that wraps up all of the notes I wanted to get through for today. The rest of today, what you should be working on is to complete the quiz associated with this video if you haven't been doing it along the way. You also have a reading and some questions to answer about a newly discovered tissue in the human body called the interstitium. And then you can begin working on the Unit 9 histology worksheet. Like all the other histologies that we've done all year, you can use your lab book as kind of a companion to help you figure out what the pictures should look like and how you can label those. Everybody should be doing their own histology worksheet, but you may work in groups if you want on the interstitium reading. One other reminder that the end of the quarter is today, so please make sure that anything that you want included in the gradebook ends up in the hand-in box or turned in on Schoology. I will be back at school on Sunday to make sure that all of your grades get updated before they run report cards. There also are parent-teacher conferences Monday night. I won't be in school on Monday, but I will be back for conferences. If your parents want to come in and hang out and talk about how you're doing in class, that would be great. I would love to see them. Also, if you're a junior, the main thing that I usually talk about with parents is if there's any other science courses that would fit your future goals and objectives that you could take here in Wahpeton. So conferences run from 3:30 to 9 in the gym. So I will see you guys on Tuesday, and feel free to email if you have specific questions.